Let's bring in foreign editor at The Australian, Greg Sheridan, as we do every week. Greg, thanks. Let's start with a letter signed by the UK, Australia and 20 other nations demanding that and urging that ceasefire. What do you make of that and Australia's contribution to it?
Well, Kieran, like everyone, I'm thrilled that Milton Dick is back as Speaker, and I've interacted with him at Australian-American Dialogues. It's very good. Look, this situation in Gaza is a terrible tragedy. The overwhelming moral responsibility for it lies with Hamas, and Hamas could end it all tomorrow by releasing the hostages. There is a ceasefire, proposed by the Americans, which the Israelis have agreed to, and Hamas has refused to entertain. It's a terrible tragedy what's happening in Gaza, a terrible tragedy, and Israel has moral responsibilities. I don't think this statement is of any use at all, however. I think the Albanese government responds to this situation entirely in terms of domestic politics, nothing else. The statement itself is a bit internally contradictory. It says there must be an immediate unconditional ceasefire, and then in another section of the statement it says there must be a negotiated ceasefire. Well, Israel has agreed to the negotiated ceasefire, but if you must have a negotiated ceasefire, that contradicts having an immediate unconditional ceasefire. I think this is just performative politics by these Western governments. I think the Albanese government has sacrificed entirely Australia's long-standing position as a friend of Israel, and if we were a close friend of Israel, as we were 10 years ago, maybe we could have some influence on them now. But this is a terrible, terrible situation, and you hope that it can finish as soon as possible.
When we talk about the foreign policy approach of the Albanese government, and we reflect on, you mentioned Milton Dick and the Parliament. I'm sure you were very interested to see the optics of it as well. The first time since World War II that you had Labor stretching right around that the horseshoe, the middle of the Parliament to the other side. It is quite a stark reminder of how successful that election was. And one of the things that we discussed during the campaign and certainly after it is the way that Anthony Albanese deals with the Australia-China relationship. I want to get your thoughts on the visit last week. What did you make of it? What's the wash-up of that visit in terms of Australia-China relations, but also Australia-US relations?
Well, Kieran, I thought the visit was ill-advised in its duration and its symbolism. And its substance. Nothing of substance came out of the visit at all, absolutely nothing. Not a single agreement of any consequence whatsoever. All the putative talk about green steel, that's just fairy floss. You know, the idea that one day we'll have green hydrogen, which doesn't exist at the moment, and that one day the Chinese will be willing to pay a vast cost premium in order to build green steel because of their commitment to net zero. At the same time, they're opening coal-fired power stations, 1 or 2 a week. They finance massive coal-fired power stations to support their nickel operation in Indonesia, which was designed to crush our nickel industry, which it did. So I think that was all kind of flim-flam and fairy floss. I think China policy has become very dysfunctional under Albanese. It seems that it's quiet and therefore everything's great. But the government no longer has a dialogue with the Australian people about the strategic challenge that China poses. The government has told us this is the worst strategic environment Australia has faced in 80 years. That is created entirely by the People's Republic of China. There's no one else causing difficulty in our strategic environment. The government won't talk about this, and to pay such, grovelling kind of tribute to Xi Jinping at a time when the Australia-US relationship is a bit of a mess, and Albanese has no agenda with Donald Trump, no relationship with Donald Trump. Our defence spending is plainly inadequate, recognised as such by everyone in the entire world who is not on the Albanese government's payroll. It plays all right with the Australian people at the moment because the government is not alerting people to the reality of the strategic situation. But in substance, it's very bad, and Australia is at the moment, Albanese is determined to be as soft and sweet as possible with our implacable strategic competitor and as stiff-backed and uncooperative as possible with our indispensable ally. Trump is a difficult customer, very hard to manage, but that's what Albanese's job is. He has to manage Trump in the interests of Australia. At the moment, I think the substance of our policy has become inimical to our national interest.
He said upon return to your colleague Ben Packham in an interview with The Australian that this was his priority now, that he will be meeting with Donald Trump a number of times over coming months. What did you make of that, particularly given the Quad talks looming, a visit to the United States and the G20 also before the end of the year, Greg?
Well, frankly, Kieran, for an ally as intimate as Australia, it's very unsatisfactory that the Prime Minister has no agenda other than that he hopes to catch up with Trump in the margins of some big multilateral meeting. Now, you can't get a straight answer from the Albanese government on anything at all, but we don't know if Albanese has tried to go to Washington to have a separate meeting with Trump. Frankly, he should have done that as soon as Trump was elected, but before he was inaugurated. But again, everything the Albanese government does in foreign policy is the lens of domestic politics. And the Albanese government thought there was no electoral benefit for them as a centre-left government to have any particular relationship with Trump. But all of the smart leaders around the world got in to see Trump as soon as he was elected, but before he was inaugurated, when he was happy. You know, he was a bit flattered to have foreign leaders come and call on him, and therefore to establish a relationship with him. Now, lots of centre-left politicians have done quite well with Trump. Keir Starmer, obviously, Mark Carney. But now he just hopes that in the sideline, Albanese that is, just hopes in the sideline of the United Nations General Assembly in New York or of Quad or at the G20, there's no guarantee Trump will go to the Quad or indeed to the G20, or if he goes, that he'll be there more than a day. Albanese, I think, wants to have a 20-minute meeting and a photo op with no substance. He doesn't want to be in the White House and in the Oval Office. But you've got to have an agenda with Trump. He's got to show something, you know, in defence spending, in economic growth, in investment in the US, whatever. At the moment, Canberra has no agenda with the United States at all. It's plainly, the Defence Force is all but falling apart. There's no sustainment money. The existing assets can't keep up their tempo of operations. We are way behind in preparing to host the American subs, which are going to come here under AUKUS. I'm coming reluctantly to the conclusion the Albanese government might be quite happy for AUKUS to fall over, frees up the money, and they can blame it on Trump. But at this stage, there's no sign that they have any agenda with Trump at all. I think Albanese feels that he's under pressure on the Trump relationship, and therefore he made those remarks to Ben Packham. But if the sum total of the Australian Prime Minister's agenda with the United States President is that he hopes to run into him in the sidelines of some multilateral summit, that shows that we've gone, as Joe Hockey put it, from being a Tier 1 ally 5 minutes ago to being a Tier 3 ally at best, and that is extremely damaging to our national interest.
Greg Sheridan, foreign editor at The Australian, great to chat. See you next week. Thanks.